Hey, Terry here. Welcome to another afternoon quickie. Hey, let me ask you a question. Is that a gun? Now, before you sit down and start typing an answer, I need to kind of warn you that was a trick question because, yeah, that's a gun. Okay, it's cap and ball. It's a cap and ball gun. Let me ask you another question. Is that a firearm? Now, before you start typing an answer again, I kind of want to warn you again that was also a trick question because the answer is yes. This is a firearm. There is this, I'm going to call it a myth. Now, if there's a lawyer out there who knows better, leave a comment and let all of us know. But there is what I'm going to call a myth floating around out there that cap and ball revolvers, black powder, are legally not classified as firearms. And I'm going to throw my 2 cents worth in on that and say that is complete and total bullshit. The national or federal, however you want to call it, Gun Control Act does provide 2 exemptions that I'm aware of for what are called antique firearms. Notice the second word in that, antique firearms. Now the definition applies 2 criteria that need to be met in order for a firearm to qualify as an antique firearm. The first is it had to be designed or made prior to 1899. Now that doesn't mean that this particular gun had to be built before 1899, just the design. Like this is an 1860 Colt Army, which predates 1899, so this qualifies. The second requirement is it cannot have been designed in order to use or have been redesigned in order to use rimfire or centerfire fixed ammunition. Now that's what we typically call a cartridge, is really all that means. And that's where you've got the 3 components, the projectile, the powder, and the igniter are fixed together in a single assembly on a brass or aluminum case, usually. That's called a fixed ammunition. So just as a side note there, this was not designed, obviously, to shoot cartridges. But the thing to remember on that is it cannot have been redesigned in order to shoot cartridges. So if I buy this, or one like it, and I do a cartridge conversion on it so I can shoot Colt 45 longs in it, by federal law, that is now a full-fledged conventional firearm because it's firing fixed ammunition. The terms antique firearm and muzzleloader in this definition are interchangeable because in the definition of a muzzleloader, the 3 components that make it a gun, basically the projectile, the main powder charge, and the igniter, the ignition or percussion cap, are carried and loaded separately, usually by being poured down the barrel of the gun, the powder and the ball. And then if it's a cap lock, then you apply the percussion cap. Now this, obviously, we don't load this by pouring powder down the muzzle. So technically, this is not a muzzle loader, but because the individual chambers in the cylinder are loaded separately, powder, ball, and then cap, it's accepted as a muzzle loader and also as an antique firearm, unless I do a cartridge conversion on it. Okay, so what does all that mean? Well, the federal law allows 2 exemptions. One is that no background check is required to buy one. The other thing is that convicted felons are allowed by federal law to buy, possess, and carry these, so long as that the state in which they live allows it. Basically, the federal government said they're just going to leave that up to the states to decide. But there's no federal regulations against it. But every other federal law applying to conventional fixed ammunition firearms applies to antique and muzzleloader firearms. For example, I can't carry this within 1,000 feet of a school. I can't take it inside a hospital. I can't take it inside a federal building like a federal courthouse. Anywhere firearms are prohibited or restricted or regulated by federal law, this is also restricted, regulated, or prohibited, with the exception of felons can buy and carry them, and no background check is required to buy one. And that's it. So the federal government is leaving this up to the states. Now, I'm not an expert on the laws in every state in the country, okay? So I'm just going to go with where I live. Now, the state that I live in is both an open carry and now a constitutional carry state, which means no permit is required to carry a concealed firearm. So, open carry, concealed carry. Anybody who is allowed to possess a firearm by law can openly carry and can concealed carry, as long as you're a resident of the state, except convicted felons. Why? Because convicted felons are prohibited from carrying concealed weapons. And this is a concealed weapon. After all, that permit is called CCW, not CCF for firearm. It's a concealed weapon. Felons are restricted from carrying concealed weapons, so a felon cannot carry this concealed. But a felon can carry it in the open. Except that there are some counties, township, city ordinances in the state that do prohibit open carry firearms. The state doesn't override or overrule any of those ordinances. It's basically just saying there's no state laws against it. But a county can have an ordinance, or a town or whatever can, and some do, have ordinances against open carry. And in those ordinances, any firearm that is prohibited from being carried, opened or concealed, applies to this. Cannot be open carried or concealed. This cannot be open carried in a jurisdiction that prohibits the open carry of firearms. Can't be carried within 1,000 feet of a school, can't be taken into a hospital, can't be taken into a courthouse, can't be taken into a police station, can't be taken into any public or private organization, building, or business which is a gun-free zone prohibiting firearms. If it's got a sign up front saying, no guns allowed, you can't take this in. So, if you're thinking, I'd kind of like to get and carry a gun for personal self-defense. Get kind of wild out there where I live, but man, I've checked into it, and to get a permit to carry a gun, I got to jump through so many hoops. I mean, I've got to have 3 priests and a congressman and 2 county sheriffs all vouching for me. It's just a real pain in the butt. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to get a black powder gun, because they're not firearms. You might want to rethink that. You could be opening up a real can of worms there, because if you ever have to use it, whether this is a firearm or not by some technicality, no, the only thing that's going to matter is you shot somebody. Was that shoot legal and justified? What you used, they aren't going to care. The law's not going to care. So, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this little video. If you did, click the subscribe, like, share buttons and notification. And see you next time.